You know, I remember a time when people got excited at the prospect of new consoles, and I don't just mean the multi-year social media campaign to will the Switch 2 into existence. But in the past, rumors of the next console cycle were among the most fun topics for gamers. After all, what's more exciting than imagining what's next? But let's make one thing very clear. We're going to be talking about the PlayStation 6 today, because in case you missed it, Sony straight up discussed their next console's architecture, and I'm not exactly a tech wizard, but this seriously sounds like they're going in a totally different direction. We'll also be speculating about PlayStation's future based on their very own playbook in generations past. We'll certainly get to that, but we'll also address the elephant in the room. Did the 9th generation ever really start? Well, if you're feeling especially pessimistic about your recent purchase of a PlayStation 5 Pro or doubtful of the entire PlayStation 5 generation, I've got some info that might change your perspective. But before we get to all of that, let's address the biggest skeptics in the room. Are consoles even going to continue to be a thing? It seems like every console generation we get a relatively well-educated, well-connected person from the industry saying that consoles are on the way out, to be replaced by phones or cloud services or even PCs. Well, they've been saying that for at least 20 years and it's not looking to happen anytime soon. And speaking of the past, would you believe the current PS5 generation has pulled in more profit than the PS2 and PS3 generation combined? In fact, Sony at its very core has restructured time and time again, pushing entertainment while keeping a foot in technology. The PlayStation brand gives them a unique opportunity to combine the two as an industry leader. Now, one thing I gotta address before going forward is Xbox, who just like Sony have confirmed, reconfirmed, and reconfirmed their commitment to hardware. Because at the end of the day, a purchase of hardware produces a commitment towards products and services. Personally speaking, I buy games for my PlayStation 5 and use my Series X as a Game Pass machine. So no matter what troll bait you've seen online, both companies will be entering the next generation with fresh hardware. And off the record, there's been a whole lot of developers being approached with a 2027 release date, although that window extends all the way to 2028. But unlike Xbox, Sony gave us some real information to work with, as vague as it might be. The presentation between Mark Cerny and AMD's Jack Huen gave us a first peek at the current state of the PlayStation 6. Yeah, I don't know why we have to pretend they won't call their next console PlayStation followed by a number, but okay, they technically haven't called anything the PlayStation 6 yet. I'll play along. But you might be wondering, do we even need another generation? Has technology advanced enough that it matters? I know you PC gamers are feeling pretty smug right now, but if anyone can understand the ebbs and flows of graphics technology over the past 5 years, it's you. When games are properly optimized and played on relatively recent hardware, they've usually got overhead to spare. AMD and Sony know this, and so they'll be adapting many of those technologies to consoles, including machine learning, which I guess you can call artificial intelligence the same way you can legally call a Roomba a robot. But really, it's some very modern solutions, including the use of PSSR, which yes is very similar to but not the same as AMD's FSR, or Fidelity FX Super Resolution, and NVIDIA's DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling. Apologies for the word salad, but we'll break it down very simply. The system will observe that overhead and find areas of improvement, producing higher quality images based on those observations. In previous generations like the PlayStation 4 Pro, it was dirt simple. Some games allowed 4K to be sampled down to 1080p televisions. Well, this occurs on a much more micro level with this technology. Sometimes it looks great, sometimes it looks like a patchwork. It's a work in progress. But if you happen to purchase a PlayStation 5 Pro, you're getting first dibs on this new tech. Or should I say a newer version of this tech. The current Pro has a feature called PSSR, but it sounds like that new upgrade set for 2026 will be a significant overhaul in a test case. If not objectively better, players are hopeful to see more modes to tinker with. And this is simply here to stay with consoles for the next generation. Heck, the Switch 2 already has DLSS. Now for this next bit, we really don't have any numbers, so I hope you'll allow me this very dated reference. But when the PlayStation 4 first launched, it was notable for having hardware resources devoted to capturing and streaming of games online. They didn't invent the idea, obviously, shout out to my Justin TV streamers, but they implemented it based on the data they were getting. So when we ask how much more powerful the PlayStation 6 can be, that's really missing the picture. It's much more about how they can allocate resources in a way that will immediately improve the end user experience. Whereas the PlayStation 5 Pro can only go so far due to its architecture, this system will adopt AMD's new technology known as neural arrays, which are advertised to balance the current tasks of the system's hardware, producing complete images. Like the PlayStation 3 versus the PlayStation 4, this isn't necessarily about raw horsepower, this is more about the optimization of tasks based on the user and developer data. That being said, there will be additional cores, and those cores will be devoted to light paths and ray tracing. It's a feature pretty much everyone likes, except the current PlayStation 5 was designed to allow but never fully embrace this demanding technology. Or is it demanding? Again, shout out to PC players, you already know the answer. Clock speeds are no longer king, it's all about allocation. To put it bluntly, we're at the point that whatever you do to a pixel, it's not going to impress anybody without some serious art direction. But crazy glowing stuff? It can be cool or realistic or inspiring. I think a lot of people realized the potential of ray tracing with the release of Quake 2's update in 2019. But by then it was already too late for consoles to change direction, let alone for yet-to-be-proven technology. Call it a cheap gimmick, call it old-school razzle-dazzle, they spent an entire section addressing this current hardware conundrum. So dedicated Radiance cores it is. But a third reason Mark Cerny casually mentions outperforming a paper spec is universal compression, which I'll be honest, I'm not sure how that really differs from the previous machine learning aspect, but the raw horsepower required will be greatly lessened by an architecture that optimizes the hardware for the task. Does that mean the PlayStation 6 will be lesser in some ways than the PlayStation 5 Pro, at least on paper? Maybe or maybe not. As they keep saying, they're in the experimental phase of the PlayStation 6's hardware testing, and there's a darn good reason they aren't telling us numbers. They're looking at the results themselves right now. But this is cold comfort to people who just nabbed their PlayStation 5, right? Well, don't be so sure. We are currently entering the 5th year of the console generation, and I totally understand why the general end-user experience has been lesser than. The lines that we saw over the summer for the Switch 2 were not possible in 2020 for either console launch. In some ways, it feels like they missed a milestone. And with sales bottlenecked by the abilities of online retailers, their raffle systems, or just basic server backend, it took a lot of people more time to get their fancy PlayStation 5s. Sony makes money on consoles, we know this, but without the continued sales of games, especially first-party games, PlayStation would suffer. Thankfully, they have produced some of the most technologically impressive, high-budget AAA games currently available on any platform. Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is arguably one of the best-looking games of this year, and it's only available on the base PlayStation 5. Spider-Man 2 was absolutely packed with content, building upon the high-speed data streaming tech implemented in the first game's ray tracing-enabled version. Oh, and then there was this little game called Ghost of Yotei, just released this fall, I'm not sure if you heard about it. Not to mention last year's wonderfully fun and flashy Astrobot, the party is still going. As we've seen with PlayStation Plus and its many tiers of digital libraries, Sony isn't interested in joining Microsoft's large-scale acquisition of the video game industry, let alone making those games available day one on some service. It's simply a different business model. There's a reason no one was surprised to see Halo finally coming to PlayStation. It's going to make Microsoft and Sony money. Meanwhile, Helldivers 2, a popular PlayStation 5 and PC game, is now on Xbox. It's a great trade for everyone. Can we expect God of War on the next generation of Xbox? That would really surprise me. After all, what's the point of buying a PlayStation if not to play the exclusives? Well, and have access to all those digital and physical games that you bought over generations. Here's hoping for backwards compatibility. Xbox is arguably the more future-thinking of the two, with Game Pass games only temporarily being included on an ever-evolving library. But PlayStation currently has the market leverage to sell games and consoles, and this builds a unique sort of loyalty by investment. As for new games, we've got an entirely new Naughty Dog sci-fi franchise and Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet to look forward to, as it doesn't sound like that'll be complete until 2027. As for Marvel fans, the new Wolverine game looks absolutely bonkers and full of all the adamantium rage fans of the character have come to expect. Again, Insomniac Games' latest isn't expected until late 2026 at the very earliest. It's a little reductive to reduce these great games to a list of names, but there's plenty of PlayStation 5 console exclusives like Stellar Blade or Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, both of which brilliantly take advantage of the streaming technology on the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive. And that's before addressing the split-generation releases, and I'll say the developers did an admirable job on the PlayStation 4, but there's certain elements such as force feedback adaptive triggers that aren't available on PS4. To me, this generation will always be about having the option to drop into 120 frames per second in God of War Ragnarok or cap it to better visuals. Options that certainly felt less impactful in previous generations, the rare occasion where performance modes were included. And again, not to boil the art form down to money, but with 80 million PlayStation 5s sold, major publishers and by virtue major developers will continue to support this generation much like the PlayStation 4. But unlike that generation, there's an increased likelihood it'll have all the pixels and polygons to look sharp, but it won't have the optimization or ray tracing, and Sony and AMD are betting big that you'll want those features. It seems a little ridiculous, but seriously, do not underestimate new features. Like, when was the last time you booted up a PS4? Even with a solid-state drive mod, these systems were completely bottlenecked by the CPU. It simply wasn't built with that technology in mind. Or who here remembers the PlayStation 3 connecting to inkjet printers? But taking a picture of gameplay or streaming, let alone social networks, that was not what the PlayStation 3 was built for. Well, except for home. In short, things are looking pretty good for everyone. We still have so many questions like the actual final specs, controller features, games, and software, but sharing this much information on their current thinking shows how much confidence they have in this direction. Meanwhile, if you don't care and just want to use your PS5 for a few more years, it sounds like you'll be well supplied with content, not directly from first party then through console or timed exclusives. On top of the already boatload of third-party games we can expect. With the Switch 2 setting the new standard for low-spec home consoles, scalability will be a much more important feature. In fact, this current ecosystem is going to offer some benefits for everyone. So getting back to our original question, are consoles dying? Not even close. But let's chat back in the comments. Did you watch this presentation? What were your impressions? And for you current gen owners, do you feel the PS5 has given you good value? Why or why not? Keep clicking around here at GameRant.com, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks everybody!